What is up, guys, and welcome back to the channel. That's right behind me is Project CB9, and we're back to work on this car. So sadly, this car has been on jack stands since December. I'm facing 3 issues with this car right now, and we'll get into more detail on those issues. So hopefully we can get this car off the jack stands and back on the road. Let's go ahead and get started. All right, guys, the first issue I was having with this car is the ECU. So essentially what was going on, I was driving the car, and once it got to operating temperature, basically retarded the timing on the motor, and it would basically put this thing into like limp mode. So it's like the engine power went from like 100% down to 50%. It was very hard to drive, so I knew something was going wrong. Obviously a check engine light was going on, and I think it was throwing code number 1 and 43 if I can recall. So I went ahead, sent off the ECU to a company called AI Tuning over there in Arizona, and they went ahead and did a full rebuild on my P13 ECU. So they hooked it up to diagnostics, and it turns out there was a transistor that was blown, so they went ahead and replaced that along with some other capacitors. And they said the reason why that transistor was blown is because the engine plugs were plugged in incorrectly. So he thinks that the idle air control valve and the charcoal canister harnesses were flip-flopped. So I'm gonna go ahead and show you guys under the hood and under the car of what those two plugs look like, and we'll see if that's the case. Before we go ahead and open up the hood and take a peek underneath the car, let's go ahead and reinstall the P13 ECU in the passenger footwell. Let's go ahead and get this thing reconnected. All right, so here's the parts I had to remove in order to get the ECU out of the car. So you got the kick panel right here, you got this door sill plate plastic piece, and then this right here is the ECU plate, and you got some miscellaneous hardware. And of course, take the floor mat up because it makes things a lot easier. Okay, let's go ahead and put this stuff all back together, and hopefully the ECU is good to go after the rebuild. So let's go ahead and put the interior back together. All right, so underneath the Project CB9, let me show you what's going on the back of the motor. So right above the oil filter, you got the charcoal canister right here. Now, I apologize if the flashlight is too intense, but this is basically just a black rectangular box. And right on this side, there's a wiring harness connector. So I went in and disconnected it, since the ECU guy thinks that I flip-flopped them. Okay, I went ahead and plugged the wiring harness connector into the charcoal box, and also disconnected the IAC valve up top from the motor, and I tried to flip-flop them, and I can't do that because basically the wiring harness is so tight, there's no way I can flip-flop them. So I'm gonna go ahead and replug the wiring harness back in position, so that's not the case of flip-flopping the charcoal canister and the IAC valve. So I went to Harbor Freight today. They had a 15% off sale, and I got an angle and straight 16-inch long reach needle nose pliers for like $11 and some tax, so not bad. As you can see, I can get nice access to that wiring harness way up there. I'm gonna have to grab it carefully with the pliers and just basically plug it back in position on the charcoal canister right there. So let me go ahead, reconnect the wiring harness on the charcoal canister, and I'll show you what's going on top of the motor. Alrighty guys, a few minutes later, got the wiring harness plugged back in to the charcoal canister. I was actually able to reach up there without the 16-inch needle nose pliers. It was a little bit tough, but I managed to do so. Alright, let's go on the top of the motor and show you what's going on. Hello H22, long time no see. Okay, back to the ECU discussion. So right there, that wiring harness with the blue tie strap, I actually had to mark that thing so I wouldn't get it confused. This is long enough to actually probably go down to the evaporator canister. However, that evap canister on the bottom, that wiring harness will not stretch to this IAT right there. The ECU guy thinks that this sensor is probably melted, so I've got a replacement. So this right here is the replacement IAT sensor. These things are very inexpensive. I think they're like 10 or 15 bucks shipped. Okay, so my tool of choice right here is a 1/4" ratchet with a screwdriver bit on there because it's a Phillips head bit. And then we'll go ahead and install the new IAT sensor. Now to verify that this wiring harness is correct, I actually had a friend on Instagram confirm the wire codes on his CB7, CB9. So you got green, white, and a red wire. And that's what's going on his IAT sensor right there. So I'm 99.9% sure that this is the correct wiring harness. And then plus on top of that, you got this little clip harness, and that clip harness goes perfectly well right down here in the engine bay. So it's actually a perfect match where this thing stretches to. Okay, so let's go ahead and remove this IAT sensor, put the new one on, and we'll replug this harness connector into position. Alrighty, went ahead and got the old IAT sensor out of the intake manifold, and this is what it looks like. So this gives me some reassurance right here because the ECU rebuilder tells me that this is gonna be melted, and this does not look melted, it just looks old. You know, so that plastic is in really good shape, it's just dirty plastic. And the only reason I'm placing this is because there's a hairline crack right there, I don't know if you can see that. So this is a new one, this thing is identical. I mean, essentially it's literally just a piece of plastic with, you know, some wiring harness connector right there inside. Same exact thing right there. Plus it's got a new gasket on top there. All right, so like I said, this provides a little bit more reassurance since the ECU guy thinks that if I flip-flop the wiring harness connectors, this is gonna be melted. So this is definitely not melted, just dirty. Okay, another thing is the tool of choice. Be careful using this. I actually dropped a bit down the motor, couldn't get to it. So between a combination of this, I guess L bracket Phillips head screwdriver, I used this, plus a shorty, I was able to get the 2 Phillips head screws off. Okay, enough talking. Let's go ahead and put the new IAT sensor into the intake manifold. All right, got the wiring harness connected to the new IAT sensor. Hopefully this thing holds. It is aftermarket, so you just never know. And tomorrow, we're gonna be putting emphasis on the valve lash adjustment for the H22. All right, here at one of my favorite places, the Salvage Yard. And we got a 1993 Honda Accord CB7 EX trim in burgundy. Let's go and check the wire code on the IAT sensor on the intake. Okay, so this down here, that's what I'm trying to verify the color. So I'm gonna go ahead, unplug this, or maybe even do a cut since this car's going in the crusher soon, so I can verify the wire code on the IAT sensor is correct on mine versus what's here in the junkyard. Okay, some unfortunate news on the IAT sensor wiring harness connector. It was seized in there. So sadly this car is gonna be crushed soon, so I went ahead and just basically cut the wires out. Okay, according to the color codes here, looks like I got a green and white and a red and yellow. So I'm gonna go ahead and throw this in my toolbox just so I don't forget. I can go ahead and verify when I get home that's correct on Project CB9. Rest in peace, Honda Accord CB7 EX in burgundy. Hoping to keep some other ones on the road. And problem number 2 with Project CB9, we got a massive oil leak on the H22. All right, so for those of you familiar with where I sourced this H22 from, basically it was from a salvage yard. And so what happened was it was from a drunk driver. So I believe it was a female's car because there's a lot of female articles inside the car, but I'm not gonna judge. Anyhow, I was told that the car was on an embankment. So if that car was at an angle on an embankment and that person did not shut off that motor immediately, it could have starved the oil pump, and then starving the oil pump will actually ruin the piston rings because it's not getting proper lubrication. So when that occurs and your piston rings start wearing down, you're gonna get excessive blow-by. And so what happens is you got excessive pressure in the upper crankcase, and that oil has to get pushed out somehow or another, you know, out of the motor. So whether it's the cam seals, valve cover seals, you know, the VTEC solenoid, that oil needs to get pushed out of the motor somehow or another. So that's what I've been experiencing. So I've got all kinds of leaks on this motor, and I'm hoping that's not the case where we got ruined piston rings. All right, so enough talking. Let me go ahead and show you guys on the underside of Project CB9, and I'll show you the back of the engine block of what's going on with this massive oil leak. Alrighty guys, problem number 2 with Project CB9, a massive oil leak. I don't know if you can see the level of filth That's accumulated on the back of that engine block for the H22, but I mean, that's just massive. Okay, so if you take a look at the back of the engine block of the H22, there's just a massive oil leak, a lot of oil residue, and it's just filthy dirty. So if you just take a look at it, it's even on the transmission case. I mean, that's how bad it is. I think it's the valve cover gasket, so I'm crossing my fingers that that is the case. So I'm hoping that this is the valve cover gasket and not the cam seals. And if you've been following this channel for a while, you know that I've actually had a lot of complications with the cam seals. I think I've opened that engine up about 3 times fixing those cam seals. That was not fun at all. And there's even some oil right there on the CV joint. I don't know if that was from the cam seal or what, or maybe I just need a new CV joint. Not sure. We'll cross that bridge. Let's go ahead, fix this leak on the back of the motor while we're at it right now. And then we can put emphasis right here on the CV joint. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and crawl from underneath the car, and we'll pop the hood, show you what the next step is. All right, about 15 minutes later, got the valve cover off the H22. Now we can go ahead and do the valve lash adjustment, and I'm gonna show you guys how to do this. So first things first, you're gonna need 2 tools. So this right here is a feeler gauge. This is the angled version. I believe they've got a straight version as well. I've heard the angled version is beneficial for Japanese cars. And then right over here, this is the valve lash adjustment tool right here. So you've got a combination of a flathead screwdriver, which you can see the flathead bit right there. And then on this end, this is a 10 millimeter. So essentially what you want to do is you want to go ahead and put the tool on top of the valves right here. But before you do so, you want to take your feeler gauge and you want to go in between the tappet and the valve. So basically insert it right here. Now, before we go ahead and do that, you want to make sure you're top dead center. So number 1, you got the arrows pointing the up direction right here on the camshafts. And then you got these lines right here that are running horizontal to the deck. So it's very important. So make sure this engine is top dead center before you start messing with the valve adjustment. Okay, so there is specifications for the exhaust side and inlet side. So I believe that the exhaust side is between 0.007 and 0.008 inches. Okay, now that you've dialed the engine in to top dead center, let's go and get started on cylinder 1. So cylinder 1 is closest to the timing belt itself. So I'm going to go ahead, insert. So let's start with the 0.07. Okay, so 0.07 and 0.08. As you can see, I got 0.07. So I'm going to insert it into here. I don't know if you can see what's going on. Okay, so I don't know if you can see down there, but that's basically how you want to insert the feeler gauges in between the tappet and the valve itself. So as you can see, there's a little bit of drag right there. It's not bad. I'm going to try the 0.08. If the 0.08 goes in there, we'll tighten up just a little bit. So there's no sense in undoing this one right here. Let's go ahead and check the 0.08. Okay, so this is 0.08. Let's go ahead and see if we can insert this into the opening right there. Okay, I feel just a little bit of drag. So I think this valve is okay. I'm not even gonna bother loosening and adjusting this one. So this is within specification. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and check the rest of the valves on the exhaust portion. And if any of these things are out of spec, I'll show you guys how to adjust it. Let me go ahead and take some measurements. All right, spoke so soon. Okay, the left-hand valve of cylinder 1 on the exhaust portion, this is on the loose side. So I'm on the 0.08, and then when I insert it, okay, you see how loose that is? You don't want that. You want a little bit of drag. Yeah, this thing is very loose. So, all right, let's go ahead and do adjustment on the left-hand valve of cylinder 1. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and take my valve adjustment tool right here, and I'm gonna go ahead and loosen the 10 millimeter right there. So let's go ahead and loosen this up. Okay, so now that this valve is now loose with the 10 millimeter nut, let's go ahead and take our 0.08 feeler gauge and insert it. And then we'll tighten down the flathead portion. Okay, so I got the feeler gauge in place. I'm gonna go ahead and get that flathead portion, make sure it bites. And I'm gonna tighten it down. Okay, see that's a little too snug right there. I can't even get the feeler gauge out, so let's back it out just a little bit. Okay, that's what you want, a little bit of drag. So let's go ahead and get that 10mm portion. I'm holding my screwdriver where it's at. Basically, I just need to get the 10mm portion locked in with the outer portion of this tool. Okay, so there it is. Okay, so I'm holding this part right here, which is the flathead end. And I want to hold it as close as I can while I'm tightening this 10mm. It only takes about 14 foot-pounds, so you don't want to tighten it too much. Okay, I got just a little bit of drag right there, and that's what you want. That's not bad. Okay, let me go ahead and point something out. So the sequence of making these adjustments is you want to do cylinders 1, 3, 4, and then 2. So finding the top dead center of the other cylinders minus cylinder 1, it can be tough. So a little strategy you can use is take a long socket into the spark plug hole. Make sure you remove the spark plugs first. And then when this socket is the highest point it is, then that cylinder is at top dead center, because you don't want pressure on the valves and camshafts when you're making these adjustments. Okay, so as you can see right here, this is cylinder 4. I'm gonna drop this down. I don't want to drop it, but it goes real low. Same thing for cylinders 2. That goes real low. Put in cylinder 1. It stands right up. So this is at the highest point. This is at the highest point. These two are at the lowest point. Okay, so I'm gonna go on the bottom here, and I'm gonna spin the crankshaft so I can get cylinders 3 on top dead center. Let me go ahead and turn this, and we'll take next step. Okay, I got top dead center of cylinder number 3. So this is 0.007. So let's go ahead and insert it between the valve and the tappet. And it goes in there, and it's dragging just a little bit. So there's no sense in loosening that thing up and making an adjustment. Let's go ahead and check the left-hand side. Okay, I got a little bit of drag right there. That's not bad. Cylinder 3 is okay on the exhaust side. Okay, let's go ahead and dial in top dead center on cylinder number 4. All right, I went ahead and found top dead center on all 4 cylinders, so I'm on the final cylinder, which is cylinder 2. Let me show you what's going on with the feeler gauge. So you got the feeler gauge in between the valve and the tappet, and let me give you the demonstration. So if you can move this thing just like so, it's too loose. You want just a little bit of drag on this feeler gauge. So with simplicity, I got a flathead screwdriver, and you want to go ahead and turn this flathead screw right there. And then once you snug it against the feeler gauge, then you can go ahead and get your valve lash adjustment tool and lock things down. So this is a combination of 10mm and a flathead screwdriver. So it's a little bit hard to do on camera, but I hope you guys get the gist of it. But you know, just give you a demonstration. See how I'm freely moving this thing? This is a 0.007. It's too loose. So you want to tighten up just a little bit so it creates just a little bit of drag on the feeler gauge. Okay, let me go ahead and wrap it up on the exhaust side, and then we'll continue on with the intake side. Okay, now they got top dead center on cylinder 1, and we've addressed all the adjustments on the exhaust side. We're gonna focus on the inlet side, or the intake. So the inlet side specifications is 0.006 and 0.007, in that range right there. Okay, so these valves gonna be a little bit more challenging to get to because it's on the back side facing the firewall, so it's a little hard to see down there. Let me get my flashlight. Okay, so there's the valves for cylinder 1 we'll do the adjustment on using my flashlight. Okay, so basically we're gonna rinse and repeat the same procedures we took on the exhaust side. So let's go ahead and get started on the intake side. Alrighty guys, we're all out of time for today's video. Now we're able to install the rebuilt ECU into Project CB9 and also do the valve lash adjustment on the valves itself. And I hope you guys can stay tuned for the next episode where we button up the H22 engine, make sure everything's sealed up properly, and then go ahead, take that key, turn it, and hopefully the engine just fires right up because, like I said before, this car has not been ran since December. So I'll go ahead and show you guys what's all involved with starting this car up, and I'll give you guys driving impressions if the ECU made a difference or not. Anyhow, if you found this video helpful or entertaining, please give me a thumbs up, Thanks for watching and have a fantastic day.